Okay, so I have been thinking a lot about change recently, and I feel like it's one of those things that you know is inevitably coming. And I guess in theory, it's happening like around us all the time. In like changing seasons, you might be starting a new school or creating new friendships, or I guess even as well, like letting some go. But it still manages to like creep up on you. And for me at least, I feel like it's one of those things that feels really far off in the distance until it actually reaches you. And then you're like, oh my god, like there's so much change happening. This is so scary and overwhelming because everything seems to be happening like all at once. Change is definitely happening in our lives like all the time. And I feel like it can either be something really small or it can be a massive, like, colossal change. But I definitely think a lot of this change happens within the period of our lives where we all start to like become adults. And I definitely think like change, you get periods in your life where a lot of change happens in a short amount of time. But like I said, I feel like, especially where now I'm 22, I think I've noticed that a lot of change happens when you go from this transition to like kind of being a teenager or like still kind of a child to then being an adult. And I guess whatever age you define as adulthood, but for me, I feel like this transition really came along in the ages like 19 to 22. So at 19, I'd been doing my art foundation back at home, and oh my god, I loved my art foundation. I feel like 2022 was when I did my art foundation, and that was definitely my favourite year. Like, I look back on 2022 as my favourite year ever. Like, I just loved it so much. And then came along this whole process of like applying to uni, attending interviews, and then actually like going to uni, meeting new people, and I guess like having all these new experiences. And now when I'm almost starting to like settle into what feels like this new way of life, I feel like it's all changing up again. So in a few weeks, I will be moving back home. I'll be graduating, and it's like this new period of my life where I feel like I'm officially becoming an adult. So, like, looking for jobs, and I'm no longer surrounded by like this safety net of school. I'm not gonna lie, I feel like it's really hard and quite frankly scary, and I feel like a lot of people can relate to that. I feel like it's because there's no routine. You kind of like don't know what to expect. And you may, I guess, have an idea for what you want to do in the future, but I think you need to lay those foundations down first. And I think those first couple of steps can seem like really terrifying. I don't know, maybe I'm like being over the top or like thinking too deeply about stuff, but I'm kind of just like expressing my thoughts. But I like my routine, and I think sometimes it can be hard when something comes along and kind of rattles it and switches things up. I think to cope with change, you really have to accept and embrace it, because if you don't, like on the contrary, you end up resisting it. And I think that resistance, in a way, makes it like difficult for the change to flow through your life as easy as possible. So like when you restrict it, I think it can like feel like it's the change is being forced on you. But when I feel like you really have to learn to accept and embrace it for it to really like flow as best as it can. You can't grow if there's no change. So like if you don't accept change or allow it to happen, you kind of like get stuck in your comfort zone and within yourself. The visual I have in my head is like, it's almost as if you're trying to crack out of an old shell, but you're not allowing yourself to do so. So there's only so much growth you can achieve in that shell before it becomes like uncomfortable and impossible for any growth to actually occur. Sometimes as well, it's not always about growth, and sometimes it definitely feels like there's not any growing happening and like you're taking a few steps backwards. But what I quite like to remind myself of is it's kind of like the changing seasons. So in the spring and the summer, everything comes to life, like it's green and it's growing. But in the winter, everything dies back, it's grey and miserable, leaves are falling and everything slows down, and it almost appears as if nothing is growing, and it takes steps backwards. But if you look over a few years, you can see that growth despite what felt like going backwards at the time. You know, if you look at a tree and it's in the winter and you might look at it and think, oh, that is not going anywhere, like that tree is not making any growth, it's like growing really slow. But like 5 years down the line, when you look at it and then you compare that to like 5 years ago, you see that growth, and that growth couldn't have happened without those changing seasons. So I guess it's not about going backwards, and those periods when it feels like you're going backwards, you're definitely not. I think it's just kind of like time to reflect and slow down, and it's definitely like all part of the process. I definitely still think change is scary, or like terrifying. I think change is terrifying, and coming out of uni, kind of having to accept that I need to do all these things that absolutely terrify me, and I can't avoid doing them, like they're things you have to do. It makes me very anxious and kind of creates this sense of like dread. So sometimes I wish I could be 7 again, like back in primary school without a care in the world. I think though with change, definitely like 100% comes with a lot of exciting opportunities and experiences. It's like giving yourself a chance to grow, and I feel like in a few years, maybe like even a few months, I'll look back at this point in my life with fondness and gratitude for accepting that in order for things to grow, we have to change.